In today's Gospel, the Lord engages in a very odd recruitment strategy. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, relations and friends, and some of you will be put to death. You will be hated by all men on account of my name. But not a hair on your head will be lost. Your endurance will win you your lives. You would think if he's trying to recruit people, he would focus more on the positives, that he would focus more on all of the glory, that he would focus on heaven, that he would focus on this great work that we're all engaged in, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and we'll all be together, and we'll all row in together, and we'll take care of each other, we'll pray for each other, and it's all going to be fantastic. But he's very realistic, the Lord, which is great, because he's not sugarcoating this message at all. In following him, there will be crosses, there will be adversity. That's part of it. And not only that, but the crosses and adversity teach us perseverance. So the crosses and adversity aren't separate from the Lord's perfect plan. The Lord's perfect will for us, obviously, is always good. Never wants sin or never wants the consequences of sin to affect us. But in his permissive will, yes, these things do happen. But even those elements or examples of his permissive will are not moments in which we have been forgotten. They're opportunities. They're opportunities for growth, as we hear in Romans 5. We glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. And perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. It's a fantastic line from St. Paul there. So this theme of perseverance, and I find myself at times a bit confused as to what I'm supposed to do, in that we had a conversation at breakfast this morning. We have multiple conversations similar to this, where someone expresses an issue or a sadness or something that they struggled with in the past. Something that often happens to us priests, where we hear these stories of people having problems. Now, we have kind of two extremes that we have to balance. One is empathizing so much with someone that you just sit down with them in their dirt. Right, so like they have a problem or they have a sadness, and you just kind of, they say, I'm really sad about this, and you sit down and you go, yeah, I suppose I understand. It's really sad. It's really awful. It's terrible. But sure, it's just really, really, really sad, isn't it? It's just really, 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 really sad. And you empathize with them, and you just kind of, you can just kind of sit there and stay with them. The other extreme then is to jump too quickly to the solution. Up you get, dust yourself off, let's get on with things, and let's just move on, let's put all the past behind us, and let's bring these things to the Lord and just move on. So you have to empathize a bit and yet get moving. You have to understand where they're coming from, and yet at the same time, don't stay there. Don't stay there. So I get it, but let's move. And there's it's a delicate balance at times. So at times people don't actually want to move. They're used to their sadness. They're used to that darkness even at times. Especially if someone has been there for years, it becomes very, very familiar, and they may not want to move. So then any talk of hope, any talk of what can be done actually isn't wanted. It's not received, because this is familiar, this is what I know. I didn't tell you so that you'd get me out of it. I told you just so that we could share it, or I told you because I wanted to make you part of this particular problem, but I'm not looking for a solution. So that can be a problem then. When you start to speak then about hope, when you start to speak about prayer, and you start to speak about bringing this to the Lord or bringing the Lord into this situation, that might not be what's wanted at all. And then you might appear to lack empathy. So there is this balance between, I understand, and I remember hearing a father now. It was a bit, it sounded a bit harsh when I heard it first, but he said he was teaching his son to ride a bike, okay, and the son was riding a bike as we all did at the beginning. We had the two stabilizers, training wheels, Americans call them. So we had our training wheels. So when you have training wheels, you can really throw the bike around, and you're safe. You're safe, right? But then there comes a time when maybe one of the stabilizers has to come off, and then you learn to cycle with a slight lean because you're leaning on the one stabilizer that you have, and then eventually the second one has to come off. Okay? Now, invariably, when you're learning to cycle and your stabilizers come off, you are going to fall. It's going to happen. It's going to happen, right? It's called learning, right? You don't get everything right all the time. You are going to fail at some point. And even if you're, by some miracle, like you're able to hold a straight line more or less when you're learning, eventually, especially as a lad, like you're going to start doing jumps and jumping off curbs and jumping off barrels and jumping off the second story of your house if you can, so there are going to be falls, right? There are going to be falls. And this father was explaining how my son was learning to cycle, and so he wanted to take a bend around an obstacle, and he fell off, and he very much grazed his knee, and he said, I didn't want to lack empathy or thought, so I went over and I said, "Son, are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I've got my knee," and he said, "Yeah, you have. Is it okay?" And they had a look at it. So he pulled the grit out of the knee, and I said, "Okay, will we just we'll clean it up, okay?" "Yeah, I don't want to cycle anymore." No, we'll clean it up, and then you'll get back on the bike, okay? We'll clean it up. You're okay. You've cut your knee. You're okay though. This isn't the end of anything. You've cut your knee. We clean it up, and you get back on the bike. All right? And he said, I was hoping, because he said, I know my wife, her reaction would have been very different. Her reaction would be, pick the child up, we got to go to A&E. No, we don't. It's a grazed knee. It's fine. He's actually fine. And he's actually learning to cycle, and he's actually doing a great job. So it's just this idea, or this reality of having to deal with problems for all of us, because all of us will be advisors to someone at some point. That balance between empathy, where you empathize with someone, and yet hope, and yet moving on. And this reminded me of something I heard years ago that I hadn't actually thought of in a while, of Aristotle. So back in the 4th century BC, between, when was he born? 385-ish, I think, and died in 322 BC. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. And he said that translated into Latin, it was in medio stat virtus. So in the middle is virtue. So the virtue stands between two excesses. So any virtue that you have, it's between two excesses. And some of the examples he gives, for example, are the virtue of courage. Okay, good thing, to be courageous. Then if you're deficient in courage, so you lack you go to one extreme where there's too little of it, then you have cowardice, where and any problem at all, and so I'll fold, whatever you want, I don't care, and you just pull back immediately. Cowardice, having no moral backbone. And then the excess of courage is rashness. So we have to convert everybody. We need to be courageous about it. Let's get our sledgehammers and force everyone into the churches. Bit rash, doesn't really work. So courage stands between deficiency and excess. Any virtue stands between deficiency and excess. Any virtue stands in the middle. And if you tip one way or the other, you end up either deficient in that virtue, or an excess of that virtue is still wrong. You think of anything. Think of your prayer life. I have a prayer life. Yeah, I pray once a year around Christmas. That's not a prayer life. Or I pray all day, every day, especially when there's work going on, then I nip off to the chapel. No. Now you're avoiding real life and avoiding work in order to hide in the chapel. That's not virtue either. Another example he gives is friendship, for example. The deficiency of friendship is quarrelsomeness, right? So being too quick to fight. And then an excess of friendship is flattery. Oh, aren't you amazing? Aren't you absolutely fantastic? And just that exaggeration of friendship, which isn't actually friendship at all. It's flattery, generally speaking. It's to achieve something for oneself, or attain something for oneself. Okay, or any virtue. There's one more example, like the virtue of self-control, for example. Self-control. Then the deficiency of that, he says, is indecisiveness, just the inability to decide. Well, I won't. I don't know. Should I? Well, maybe I'll get advice. Maybe I get advice. Maybe I won't get advice. Should I get advice? If I get advice, who do I get advice from? Them, or maybe neither. I don't know. And it's just self-control where it errs so much on the side of caution that you just can't decide anything. And then obviously the excess of that is impulsiveness, where we just drive into something without much reflection. Okay, point being, the Lord today speaks about perseverance. By your perseverance, by your endurance, you will win your lives. So our perseverance or our endurance will be tested. It absolutely will be tested. And as people who walk with others, and even as we look at our own lives, it's very helpful to keep in mind the excesses that we can fall into. We want to live a virtuous life. So when things go wrong, we don't want to fall into self-pity. At the same time, we want to recognize the validity of how we feel and what we've been through. Absolutely, there's validity in it. But you can't sit there and stay there either. We recognize that things have gone wrong. We recognize that we have been wronged. We recognize that there is injustice in the world, and sometimes that has happened to me. Okay, yeah. And now move on. Otherwise, endurance or perseverance doesn't exist. You know, otherwise we're not choosing endurance or perseverance. We're just surviving, just maybe even settled in our darkness, settled in our pain, and that would be very unfortunate. Because that's not perseverance. It's not what the Lord is talking about. He wants us to push on, so to recognize that we have been hurt, there are wounds, but to not stay there. We glory also in our sufferings, says St. Paul, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. How are we going to learn perseverance unless there's been some cross that we have to carry? It's this kind of sad reality, but a truth nonetheless. You know, the Lord is very clear about this. You will be betrayed by parents. So if you follow me, it's not going to be easy. He said this from the beginning. But the whole point is those obstacles, they teach us. Those obstacles are an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for virtue. Our suffering produces perseverance. Our perseverance produces character. And our character produces hope. And so, whatever we're going through, whatever we're struggling with, there's nothing wasted. There's nothing pointless. There's no situation where we were simply forgotten by God. So we ask for the grace to be able to respond with virtue to whatever life throws at us, or has thrown at us, or will throw at us. That we can always maintain that virtue of perseverance. That when things get tough, we'll recognize the Lord has not abandoned me. The Lord has given me an opportunity. And yes, this may be hard, but I don't want to stop walking. I can't stop now. The Lord is on my side. And if God is for us, who can be against us? Amen.